Welcome to episode 12 of Untangled Faith.
But then the flip side of that is blasting those who might threaten that. So blasting those who might bring a shadow where we're used to basking in the sunlight and the glory of all of this. The response then is to blast that person as a way of removing the negative associations that that person is bringing into the picture. The bystanders shouldn't have to be fighting to expose these dark secrets.
This is Amy Fritz, and you're listening to Untangled Faith, a podcast for anyone who has found themselves confused or disillusioned in their faith journey. If you want to hold on to your faith while untangling it from all the things that are not good and true, this is the place for you. Today I'm sharing part 2 of my conversation with Wade Mullen. Mullen is the author of the book, Something's Not Right, Decoding the Hidden Tactics of Abuse and Freeing Yourself from Its Power. He's also a professor, researcher, and advocate working to help those trapped in the confusion and captivity of abusive situations. I'm rewinding a bit to set the stage for today's episode. In order to preserve the context of this conversation, I wanted to rewind and start with the conversation that we began at the end of the last episode. So if this sounds familiar, there is a little bit of overlap.
The question of, what do I do when it comes to abuse? The answer has to be highly contextualized. Abuse can take so many different forms. I think there are some principles that can apply just about in any situation, though. And I think one of the principles is to stop and pause and make sense of what you are hearing. And I think there's some wisdom behind that of asking the question, what do I need to understand that perhaps I don't understand? Who do I need to talk to perhaps that can help shed light on my understanding? So there could be an expert in whatever the situation is that can help you understand what you're hearing. So it's pausing and trying to arrive at an accurate understanding of what you're hearing. And then I think another principle is to check your own motives and check your own emotional state, because it's easy for us to excuse our own inaction and remain indifferent or keep the other person and their story at an arm's length by saying, it's none of my business, or, wouldn't it be right for me to get involved? What we're really doing is we're denying the injustice. And I think it's important for us to allow ourselves to face the injustice, to face the assault on beauty, and to become angry about that, righteously angry about that, and to be sad about it, and to sit in that pain that you've just encountered. Because I think good advocacy needs to be driven by strong emotion, strong regulated emotion. It needs to be driven by empathy. It needs to be driven by a concern for other people who might also be harmed. It needs to be driven by a love for the person who has been harmed. It needs to be driven by a concern for the person who is inflicting harm on other people. That is something that has to be guarded, I think. By the way, I would say too that if you're a bystander, I think you need your own assistance. You need your own therapy. You need your own person who's able to guide you as you take those steps. Kind of create these structures for yourself that will allow you to advocate well, to advocate in an ethical way, and to advocate in a way that will help you preserve your own health. And then you need to come up with a strategy, I think. You need to come up with a game plan. You need to decide what action steps you're going to take in order to help shine light on this. And so that obviously then has to be highly contextualized depending on what the situation is.
And once you've seen something, you can't unsee it. Once you hear something, you can't not hear it. Yeah, I think some people don't want to see, so they will purposefully not, they'll purposely look away, or they'll purposely close, plug their ears.
There's an aspect of that is normal. Anytime we come across something that is tragic, I think there's a normal response to that we have to be aware of. And so we need to also kind of give ourselves some grace. I also think that, this is where help from other people, is really important, so that you're not just advocating by yourself, so that you can get some support from other people. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's very difficult. It is very difficult, and I'm not sure everyone appreciates how hard it can be to be a bystander who chooses to act on behalf of someone who's harmed, because most bystanders won't do anything. So
Right.
If you become a bystander who chooses to act, you become often a target yourself. It is a difficult road to walk down, and I'm not sure everyone understands the cost that many bystanders who choose to act have had to pay.
Yeah, I have an interview that I am sharing with Melissa Hogan. Her former husband worked for Ramsey Solutions, and she said to me that she didn't want to say some things to some of her friends about what she was seeing and experiencing, because she knew that knowledge would be a burden. It would require someone to do something. She didn't want her friendship to be costly to other people. So she was in some ways willing to just not say anything and just carry that herself, because she knew that people of integrity would feel compelled to do something. So it's a very hard situation to be in.
And one of the things that I've tried to do when I come across this phenomenon of the bystander and what they do with information that they have, that perhaps they didn't expect to have, they didn't ask for, but now they have it, is to try to reframe the situation by looking at it from the perspective of the harm and the damage that the perpetrator has caused, and that this is an effect, a consequence of that abusive individuals or organizations' behavior, that they have created this environment where there are dark secrets that exist. And now an individual, let's say a bystander, is possessing, that abusive individual or organization's dark secret that they shouldn't have to be carrying. And that situation is caused by the abuser. And it's that in and of itself is an injustice. And yeah, so
that's a really interesting point, is that the burden for the negative outcome should not be on the truth teller.
Right. So the bystander shouldn't have to be fighting to expose these dark secrets, or fighting to try to figure out, how do they carry this dark secret? What do they do with it? Who do they tell? Who do they not tell? They shouldn't have to be working through all of that if the abusive individual or the organization was trustworthy, was operating with transparency and honesty. And so it's part of the shadow that is being cast by the toxic, abusive environment. People are having to figure out what they do with information that is weighty and heavy and toxic, and information that they shouldn't have had to carry to begin with.
Have you had any crazy, wild, unexpected responses to your book?
I've had a couple people now reach out and say something along the lines of, I recognize how I have harmed other people. And I've been encouraged by that, because the vast majority of the readers are those who have been harmed. Mm-hmm. And I've had a couple people say, hey, I did this when I was in power, over a group of people. This was a very difficult read for me. So I would say that's probably in the category of something that I hoped for, necessarily expect. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's more rare, but you have had a few conversations like that. Do you have any examples of places, organizations, churches that have responded well, or either at some point they got their act together, even if initially their first response to an image threatening event was protection?
And I would say that this is one of the common questions that I get is, do you have any basically models for us of a church and organization that has done it well? There are examples of organizations and churches who have taken positive steps. I don't know of any that I believe have done all that they can and ought to do, because one of the steps that I think any church or organization ought to take is to offer generous restitution to the people they've harmed. And I'm sure that they're out there, but I don't know of a public example to point people to.
Sure.
There are churches who have made statements of apology, which is a positive thing. And there are churches who have removed leaders, which is a positive thing. So there are churches that have taken good steps, but I don't think that we have a clear understanding of what the standard needs to be. And I think one of the tests of change, the sincerity behind that change, is the sacrifice that an individual or organization is willing to take in order to not just restore what somebody has lost, but to go above and beyond, to offer generous restitution, like up to 4 times the amount that a survivor has spent on counseling costs over 20 years. I haven't seen that kind of generous restitution yet.
And if it's done in a real sincere way, maybe we would hear about it from a survivor that wants to tell that story and not from an organization or a leader themselves.
Right. Yeah. And I also think that the organization will see that as part of their own story and not try to separate the pain from their own story. I think what that could mean or look like is keeping a statement up on their website permanently, creating a memorial at their church for the people that they have harmed. So there's ways in which I think they can tell the story of their own wrongs and then what they continue to do to make that right, so that, again, other people, those who have been victimized, they don't have to be the sole bearers of that story. The church is in some way taking that responsibility off of them and saying, if anybody ever asks you what happened, why did you leave, you can point them to our website. So I think there's just a lot that we haven't seen yet that I hope that someday we will see. People are looking for, are there positive examples? Are there stories of redemption, and are there stories of change that will give us hope? And I will say that there are some at the individual level. I think there are many at the individual level where, I know of a pastor who realized that years ago when he was leading a church, he abused his power and he hurt a lot of people. And he spent 2 years meeting with and writing to those who were willing to speak with him to apologize and to make amends. So it's very moving when I heard that. I heard of a story of a church who realized that 30 years ago when they split from another church, that it was done deceptively and it was done in a way that caused a lot of pain. And they went back, those who were still there, to that church that they had split off from, and they apologized for what happened 30 years ago because the pain was still real. And so there are examples of individuals, but you don't hear, they're not public. There are examples out there of people who have done positive things to make things right.
Yeah, I love hearing that. And, we want to hang on to something because we don't want to, just burn the whole thing down and wash our hands of it. Most people listening to this are believers. We have faith in a God that can redeem all things. It's just that I think the timing of it sometimes takes a lot longer than we would like.
And in most cases, it doesn't happen in this life. And that's the sad reality.
So I did kind of spring on you last minute asking if you would be willing to look at that response to that Religion News Service article that came out in January by Bob Smetana regarding Ramsey Solutions. And what a good journalist does is they reach out to the other side and they ask for their response, and so that they could get their comment on what they were going to be reporting on. And in the article, there was going to be some very serious allegations made that the company had known about and was covering up some serious issues with one of their high profile speakers, as well as some other high control things happening and unhealthy things that some of us were talking about with Bob. And so they responded, and I am curious of your thoughts on what you saw in that response.
On January 15th, 2021,
Bob Smetana published an article about Ramsey Solutions. I had gone on the record for this article, and that Friday morning, I sat at my friend's dining room table and waited anxiously to read the final product. When it was finally live on the website, we noticed that Bob had linked to a response from Ramsey Solutions. The previous day, he had reached out to them for comment on his reporting. As I read the response, I was shocked at the bullying, sarcasm, and blatant misrepresentation of Bob and his work.
What I did in the dissertation, and what I'm trying to help people do for themselves through the book, is to conduct it's called qualitative content analysis, a piece of material. It's important that that analysis be reliable, that your interpretations have some degree of reliability. So there are tests of reliability. And so one of the tests is to give a framework, a certain categories of impression management, let's say, to a group of people, 3 people maybe, and you teach them this framework and you teach them these definitions and you practice how to apply them to different pieces of content. You do some training and then you test that over time and you see. So that's called inter-rater or inter-coder reliability. If you don't have multiple people to do that and you're just doing it yourself, then there's ways to test what's called intra-rater or inter-coder reliability, where you look at a piece of material and you interpret it, you code it, you categorize it, and then you wait maybe 14 days and you do it again. It's just recognizing that there are other factors that might be influencing your interpretation. You could be sick or hungry or anything.
And you're saying that you just have you looking at it right now. You don't have a team.
And this morning, right? So that's my long disclaimer.
Right. To clarify, Wade is saying that there is subjectivity to this process and that to get the most reliable results, it's best to have several different people to do analysis of the communication. Wade is giving his personal opinion on the Ramsey response within the constraints he had. It was only him looking at it, and he didn't have the luxury of going over this several times over a longer period of time. Here's what he saw.
There's a subjectivity to it. The 2 group of tactics that stuck out to me as I mainly read the response to Bob are what's called burgeoning, basking in reflected glory. And then the other side of that coin is a tactic called blasting. So these are what are called indirect tactics, complex deception, creating a whole host of connections to associations, associated events, or associated people, like name dropping. I grew up in the same town as so-and-so, right? So these are indirect methods of managing our image and shaping the impressions others are forming of us, because we're not just presenting information that's directly about us, but presenting information about someone or something else, knowing that the people who are looking at that information will connect us to that, and it will shape their image of us as well. So it's this indirect kind of approach to managing people's impressions of us. So with Dave Ramsey, what I'm seeing is some self-promotion, some basking, right? Basking in past success, basking in going from rags to riches, basking in, big brand new building. When we're basking, we are enjoying the sunlight that is bouncing off of something that we created, or be basking in the fame and popularity of a politician or of a religious leader, that kind of thing. So we're basking, we're enjoying that. And with basking, a lot of times then that person is going to exaggerate. So he's calling, his workplace, from what I understand, the greatest place to work, I think. It's a good place to work. So there's this comparison to others. There's this exemplification of the organization, basking in that. But then the flip side of that is blasting those who might threaten that. So blasting those who might bring a shadow, where we're used to basking in the sunlight and the glory of all of this. The response then is to blast that person as a way of removing the negative associations that person is bringing into the picture. So the only thing that can exist in the realm of someone who's basking in glory are positive associations. If negative associations start working their way in, then typically what the person who tends to bask in glory will do is to blast the person who's bringing those negative associations into the picture, primarily by belittling their strengths, So this isn't a real journalist, or this.
Yeah,
So
where he uses in quotes freelance reporter.
there's this debasing, there's this mocking, there's this, sarcastic kind of language.
Here are a few examples of the belittling and sarcastic response from the public relations email account for Ramsey Solutions. I'm just going to quote some of their response here. Who would have guessed that an unemployed guy, a freelance reporter, would be the one to show us how horrible we are so we can change? As a point of clarification, the journalist was not unemployed, nor is he a freelance reporter. Later in their response from Ramsey Solutions, they went on to invite Bob to a worship service they had previously scheduled for that evening. They said Bob could bring his camera, and here's a quote. "Since this is today, it won't even delay your Pulitzer Prize-winning expose of our pure evilness. Yes, you will be in a building where 1,000 people hate you."
That's, in my mind, is attempting to create this impression in the minds of those who are reading that this is not a legitimate journalist, that this is not somebody who can be trusted, that this is not somebody who should be taken seriously.
Sort of framing what this reporting is. And if you read the article, it's not at all what he did, but they say, yeah, real sarcastically, we want to confirm, you're right, we're horrible, evil people. We exist to bring harm to our team, take advantage of our customers, and spread COVID.
Right. It's exaggerating it. It's making the report sound outlandish so that it can then be easily discounted and easily condemned.
The last paragraph mentions that this email was blind copied to pastors and business leaders, as well as the entire Ramsey Solutions team. The author of this email encourages people to call Bob and tell him, quote, all the evil, horrible stories you know about us. And then the email tells the recipients the city where Bob lives. And this is in the final paragraph. And I'm quoting, "If you see him out and about, be sure to congratulate him on his virtue. He needs to sell this story to pay his rent, and the dirtier your story on us, the more we can help him. When you call, please do not be mean. Bob already has a lot of anxiety, and we don't want to add to that." The last sentence says this: "It is time the world knows about Bob and the blessing he has been to so many."
But the lie is in the embellishment. The lie is in the exaggeration. It's kind of like saying, this is a witch hunt. When people say that, there's really two lies often that are embedded in that. The one is the lie that says we are being hunted down unfairly. And the other lie is saying they're irrational in their hunt. This kind of communication tells multiple lies because it's all about the connections that the communicator is forming, and that's what I see here.
In this case, the Ramsey response is framing this as a hit piece. They're saying, we are being hunted unfairly, and they are irrational.
That's what sarcasm, satire, that kind of thing does. It creates these associations that shape people's perception of the person that they want to belittle or demean or condemn.
And you haven't had a lot of time to think about this, and I don't know if this goes into image management. What would the point of sending out this response went to the full team that works there, as well as few local business people and pastors? Why? Why would that be helpful in any way? Is my question.
Yeah. Well, of course, I don't know for sure, but there are some possibilities. There's something called anticipatory impression management, where somebody might know that a story is coming. Negative information is going to be out there. And so they attempt to get out in front of it. So they're basically tagging or copying other people who might inevitably come across this information as a way of saying, they didn't tell you, we told you. And it's getting out in front of it. Because the benefit of getting out in front of it is to redefine it. And so what then those local pastors or what even perhaps the employees get is Dave Ramsey's definition of the situation, which is the primary objective of impression management is to define the situation for others so they can't define it for themselves, or so that other people can't define it for them. And so it's an attempt to maintain control of the narrative, perhaps, by getting out in front of it.
I told you Wade was smart, right? This jives with so much of what we've seen. Employees have told me of times when there has been something negative about Dave or the company in the media. Dave then specifically tells people not to give clicks to these accounts, and he spins his own narrative. His narrative was nowhere near what the real story was.
Or it could be an attempt to rally supporters, could be an attempt to intimidate the journalist, could be an attempt to test the loyalty of followers. Let's see what you do with this information. Are you going to come through for me? Are you going to have my back? So there could be multiple agendas behind it. It certainly, though, isn't healthy.
Testing loyalty. That is one of the possible reasons for sending this response to local pastors and business leaders is consistent with the communication I've heard or read from Dave and the leaders at Ramsey Solutions. Not being loyal to Dave is the unforgivable sin. Yeah. Have you seen anything like this? It feels like an attempt to protect an image that is backfiring spectacularly.
Right, yes. Because people are seeing through it and seeing how unusual and odd it is, kind of the bully behavior. Yeah. I would say that I see similar examples when somebody receives a critical comment on Twitter in a reply, let's say, and the person who has like a lot of followers takes that critical comment and quote tweets it and puts it out there as a way of calling followers to go after that person's criticism. So I've seen that, so it's kind of, might be similar to that, where you're kind of putting somebody on blast so that they can then receive all of this condemnation. There are numerous studies of organizational leaders who have had to respond to a scandal, to a threat to their image. And, there's one in particular that was done of a man who ran an environmental waste processing company, and they were called to give an account for their mismanagement. And he, in his response to others who were, shining a light on this, primarily engaged in what the researcher called a tactic of condemning the condemner. He was focusing his efforts on condemning those who were condemning them. So I see that too happening here, where it's a condemnation of the person who's bringing condemnation.
I wanted to finish out by asking you a question that somebody had asked. What kind of hope can you offer to somebody? What hope would you give to somebody that hasn't had that bow to tie it up with?
I recognize how difficult it is to hold on to hope, how you become de-hoped over time. And that's part of the difficulty, is knowing that hope is waning, experiencing that and not having any control of that. The hope comes when light somehow makes its way through. I'm involved in some cases right now, and I have very little hope that there's going to be a positive outcome. But I'm still engaging. I'm still taking steps, because I believe that as long as there's still that opportunity for light to shine, that light might have the power, the ability to at least slow down the evil, to at least keep the foot in the door, perhaps for others who might experience something similar.
Yeah. So success isn't necessarily a full restoration with people that have hurt you, but maybe that you've offered help and assistance to other people.
I know of a church who covered up something years ago. The person who was harmed by that cover-up had taken many steps to shine a light on the situation, and it didn't happen. The cover-up was successful. Years went by, and nothing came of that. And then somebody else came forward with a similar story, and another person did. But then all of a sudden, there was a link that was made between these multiple stories over time. That person's willingness years ago to take steps to shine a light and to call leadership to account became critical evidence, that was used to show that, and the stories that we're hearing now are likely true because similar stories were being told 10, 20 years ago. And so sometimes you don't see the light break through until much later. There is a lot of evil out there, and there is a lot of evil out there that is having its way. And where we can find hope, where we can find an opportunity to slow that evil down, where we can find opportunity to bring good, cultivate good, we need to cherish that. I want to read this quote that came to mind just now from Judith Herman, because she talks about the survivor who chooses to take public action. She says the survivor who undertakes public action also needs to come to terms with the fact that not every battle will be won. But I think this is where the hope comes in. Her particular battle becomes part of a larger ongoing struggle to impose the rule of law on the arbitrary tyranny of the strong. She must be secure in the knowledge that simply in her willingness to confront the perpetrator, she has overcome one of the most terrible consequences of the trauma. She has let him know he cannot rule her by fear, and she has exposed his crimes to others. So there's, I think there's hope that can be found in knowing that, there's this larger ongoing struggle that you can be a part of.
This interview and my editing schedule came at the right time. I have been feeling the weight of the cost of speaking out. I needed the reminder that I need my own support system, and going back and looking at the abusive and deceptive narrative that hurt us has helped solidify in my mind that I'm not crazy and I didn't imagine this or manufacture it. I hope this conversation encouraged you. I'm positive it educated you. If you want to hear more from Wade Mullen, you can find him at wademullen.com. On Twitter, he is @WadeMullen. Thanks for listening to this episode of Untangled Faith. If you enjoyed this podcast, the best thing you can do for me is to share it with a friend and leave a review on your favorite podcast player. For transcripts and show notes, you can find me at untangledfaithpodcast.com. And I'm Untangled Faith on Facebook and Instagram. I wanted to remind you that I have a newsletter that I send out each week on Saturday morning. I would love for you to get it. I'll be choosing 2 people from my email list to receive a copy of Wade's book, so be sure to sign up by July 31st, 2021 if you're listening to this in real time to be eligible. Go to untangledfaithpodcast.com and sign up. I'll see you back here next week on the next episode of Untangled Faith.
If the idea of speaking makes you feel like you're going to get in trouble, that's a red flag in itself.
Yeah. The point of this episode is I really want to share with people the value of having somebody as you're coming out of a painful situation, the value of community and how that has helped us